Across fiction, there are various gods that serve different roles, enacting their will from above, below, or someplace entirely different. But every so often, there comes a story with a god that just feels different, as something that reflects human darkness in the worst ways, threatens to erase the very things that make us human, or propose a concept so foreign to us that just the thought of it is terrifying. Hello everyone, welcome to another video where I will be talking about some scary depictions of gods from media that I discovered recently, as well as recommendations from my last video on this topic. You can expect spoilers on everything I talk about, and let's get started. I absolutely love Twin Peaks, and there is truly no other TV show quite like it. I've mentioned it once before under the sphere of cosmic horror, but in this universe there are some very interesting godlike entities. The good fireman and the evil Judy. Judy is a very ancient being that is the source or mother of all evil. Physically, she looks like a nude, gray, demonic humanoid floating through space or jittering, on one occasion inside of a cage built to contain her. She also sometimes appears as a white horse, which means her first appearance was in the original seasons, and the horse form is so random and out of nowhere that it's kind of unsettling. This is her symbol, a blob with two horns, and something about it I always found kind of creepy. It's such a simple shape, but the weight it carries makes it hit hard. Judy is able to possess humans, and she does exactly that with Sarah Palmer, a woman that goes through a lot in the series, and as a result, she's always reiterating her despair and trauma, which is the perfect fuel for Judy. But Judy also possessed her early on, so maybe Judy is the cause of all that sorrow within her. In episode 8 of The Return, we see an atomic bomb test that allows Judy to bleed into our reality and unleash evil forces such as Bob and the Woodsman, which are like extensions of her evil. I think it's cool that this evil came into our world from the atomic bomb because that's when humanity took an unprecedented step towards evil. So it's very fitting. It's like humanity finally reached the point where entities such as Judy are ready to come feast on the darkness of our world. What's interesting is that the first mention of Judy was in 1992's Fire Walk With Me, where Philip Jeffries runs into the FBI office and mentions her, terrified.
In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all.
I always found that scene to be very chilling. In the hierarchy of evil in Twin Peaks, right under Judy there is Bob, who is the main antagonist of the original seasons. And Bob is like a parasitic force that feeds on human suffering, possessing people and pushing them towards violence, so he can consume the result of that. In the original series, he comes from the Black Lodge, a place that exists outside normal reality and operates on its own supernatural logic. He doesn't really have a physical form of his own, so he manifests through a human host, most famously Leland Palmer, and uses that body to inflict chaos on the world, unfortunately including his own daughter. He's an extension of Judy in this world, where human suffering is just another kind of energy, harvested and traded by beings whose motives we can barely understand. Leland's wife Sarah being possessed by Judy could explain why she never acted on Leland's wrongdoings too. There are also the Woodsmen, which are very creepy, and their job is basically to clean up after supernatural events caused by other evil forces like Bob. In episode 8, they take over a radio station and transmit a broadcast that kind of entrances those who hear it. This allows a strange frog with wings to hatch and enter a young girl's mouth, who I believe is Sarah Palmer, so that would mean that this is the moment she got possessed by Judy. Their base is also very cool. It's a rundown convenience store / gas station that has its own rules and logic. Then there is the fireman, which is the opposite of Judy, a benevolent being. He lives in a realm that looks like a theater or an old monochrome dream, a space completely outside of time where everything moves slowly. The way he communicates is also strange. Visions and cryptic messages that he sends into the world like warnings. Maybe because if he directly interfered with the world, it would mess some things up, and then his effect would be more alike to Judy's. He creates small pieces of hope and sends them into the world, almost like counterweights to the darkness. Right after the atomic blast opens the door for Judy's influence, the fireman creates Laura Palmer's golden orb and sends her down to Earth as a response to the evil. The fireman is much more chill than Judy, and probably not as powerful, because evil is stronger than good. His whole presence is very calm, in contrast to Judy and her meddling with nature directly. Judy forces herself into people, and the fireman only appears when someone is ready to receive a message, even though that message is usually very cryptic.
The owls are not what they seem.
It's like he's trying to do the minimal amount of interference he can, but still trying his best to fix things. The story of Twin Peaks is basically good versus evil at its core, but I think this might be one of the best representations of that, because Judy's evil is just so absolute and results in horrible acts that we see on screen, which feel personal and relatable. One thing I noticed is that in the original seasons, while there were a lot of bad things happening, the world still looked brighter and the good sides of people rose to the top. But in the return, everything is darker and we get to see a lot more of the evil happening, even though those scenes may not seem connected to any plot, just to illustrate how the world is becoming incrementally more evil over time, all starting from the moment of that atomic bomb test. In my last video on this topic, I mentioned Berserk, where I talked about the God Hand and their powers, abilities, and their cosmic significance in this universe. But there is another entity in Berserk that exists even above them, the idea of evil. The most information we get about this thing actually comes from a removed chapter of the manga, chapter 83, God of the Abyss Part 2. It was removed because Miura felt that it revealed too many answers to the story. When Griffith activates the Bail during the eclipse, he's taken deep into the astral realm, into a place described as the world of ideas, a space that exists beyond the physical and maybe even spiritual, where concepts themselves take form. This is where he encounters the idea of evil, a godlike being that rules basically everything from the bottom layer of the astral world. Physically, it looks like a massive, heart-shaped object suspended by chains in the abyss, pumping fluid through veins that stretch out and swirl in the darkness. It resembles a human heart because it was created by humanity itself, or rather by the human desire to explain evil and give it a form. And this thing fits neatly with Lovecraftian cosmic gods because it's not something a person can really interact with. It's more of a cosmic principle than a character. In the removed chapter, the idea of evil explains that it was formed by the collective consciousness of humanity. All the despair, suffering, and the desire to find meaning behind tragedy gave rise to this being. An ocean of feelings. All humans have, deep in their souls, a common consciousness that transcends individuality. Their collective consciousness as a species. Its dark side is this swelling ocean. I was born from these swells as the ego of this world. Violence and loneliness. This place is filled with all kinds of blurred negative feelings. It is truly the will that defines human nature. It's not that it likes evil or enjoys it, but evil is categorized under it, based on human emotions. It basically embodies what humanity defines as evil, and it shapes destiny accordingly. Its influence on Griffith was present long before the eclipse, guiding his dreams and ambitions so he would become the perfect candidate to join the God Hand. The idea of evil set the conditions for suffering, and people like Griffith act within those conditions. It says that it controls destiny, but not for its own interest, but the interest of those who created it, which is humanity. It shaped the events of everything leading up to Griffith, so that he would go through everything he went through and ultimately ascend as one of the God Hand. And the idea of evil says that it doesn't want Griffith to do something, it is just enabling him to do what he was always going to do. I guess the evil of humanity eventually led to the creation of Griffith as some messiah of the idea of evil, along with all the other members of the God Hand, making them a sort of culmination of despair and suffering. I do wonder though, if there is an idea of evil, does that mean that there is some idea of good in this realm of ideas? But I guess even if this did exist, the evil would overwhelm it. Another interesting god comes from the Neverending Story, though just like in Berserk, it isn't really a god in the traditional sense. In this universe, the most godlike entity is the Nothing, and it's an abstract force that erases reality itself. Entire lands and memories disappear when it reaches them, and what is scarier than that? The Nothing basically just consumes, as if Fantasia is rotting from the edges inward, and the story connects that destruction directly to our world. The Nothing grows stronger whenever people stop caring about fantasy or imagination. When humans lose their sense of wonder, Fantasia starts to fall apart. The nothing is a force tied to human consciousness, expanding whenever the human world becomes more cynical and disconnected from imagination. In the novel, when Atreyu tries to look at the nothing, he is unable to do so and his eyes start to hurt because it is incomprehensible. And in the movie, its powers are shown as a violent storm, destroying the landscape. Although I don't think that the storm itself is the nothing, more so just what it's doing. Then there is Gmork, a very scary looking wolf that is like an emissary for this cosmic void. He explains the nothing and says that he serves it because a world without meaning is easier to control. His speech is very ominous, more so than if he was just a scary wolf that tries to kill you, because in a story filled with magical creatures, the most terrifying idea is that the destruction of imagination isn't caused by some monster like him, but by humans giving up. And it sounds pretty reasonable. And in the story, it's not a good versus evil conflict, like for example in Twin Peaks. It's more like a reflection of how fragile imagination is and how it's dwindling over time. Fantasia can only exist if humans keep creating stories. The nothing grows when we stop. So the most powerful god in this universe is the idea that imagination itself has cosmic weight and that losing it has terrible consequences. The Nethescurial is a short story by Thomas Ligotti, and it speaks of an omnipresent entity that exists everywhere and in everything. And although that might sound a little basic at first, I think this story does a great job of showing how horrible an entity like that would be. There is an important chant that accompanies this deity. In the rooms of houses and beyond their walls, beneath dark waters and across moonlit skies, below earth mound and above mountain peak, in northern leaf and southern flower, inside each star and the voids between them, within blood and bone, through all souls and spirits, among the watchful winds of this and the several worlds, behind the faces of the living and the dead. The story begins with the main character finding a manuscript from another guy who went to an island where some strange stuff was going on. The author of the manuscript deeply felt the presence of this thing on this island where he went to meet another man. The island itself was called Nethescurial, and it featured contorted rock formations, pointed pines and spruces of gigantic stature and uncanny movements, the mask-like countenance of sea-facing cliffs, and the sickly, stagnant fog clinging to the landscape like a fungus, sculpted its nightmares out of the atoms of the local earth. The vibe I got from this description is that the island is like a diseased location where the veil between our world and of this entity is the thinnest, so weird stuff can bleed through. And when I was reading this, I actually visualized the Upside Down from Stranger Things, how it's kind of a moldy, rotten version of our world. So this island holds an artifact that is an effigy of the real Nethescurial. And in the Weird Tales version of the story, there is a picture to go along with it, and I think the picture is of this artifact. And it looks very spooky. It is a twisted piece of a puzzle, one suggesting that the figure as a whole is intensely unbeautiful. The fragment is also darkened with the verdigris of centuries, causing its substance to resemble something like decomposing jade. And we get some more information about this deity. There used to be an ancient sect of worshippers dedicated to it, who believed that everything was made of this unified, transcendent stuff, and this stuff would be the Nethescurial. And the story says that this would place him above all other gods, because no matter what entity you name, you can say that it was made from the Nethescurial, since everything ever is, according to this story. A most primal and pervasive type of god, one that falls into the category of gods who eclipse all others, territorialist divinities whose claim to the creation purportedly supersedes that of their rivals. Then one day it turned out that he was evil, and this revelation came in a manner both obscure and hideous. This split the worshipper sect into two, the ones who liked him and the ones who didn't, and the good guys won. So all this info came from the manuscript that the main character is reading, and now we get to a sort of zoom out when we get to his actual life and not just him telling us what he read. And then he starts kind of reviewing what he just told us and criticizing the writing, which was kind of funny because at this time he still thinks it's all made up. And I thought this was kind of a cool way to add a new layer to the cliche of Lovecraftian stories. But even though he dismisses it here, he imagines how horrible an entity like the one described would be. hiding in the darkness, threatening us like a bad dream. The nature of that pandemoniac entity is very intriguing. Imagine all of creation as a mask for the foulest evil, an absolute evil whose reality is mitigated only by our blindness to it. An evil at the heart of things, existing inside each star and the voids between them, within blood and bone, through all souls and spirits, and so forth. Imagine the universe as the dream, the feverish nightmare of a demonic demiurge. O supreme Nethescurial. Later on that night, he starts to get affected slowly. He says that the veil between him and the evil has lessened considerably. He dreamt of a desk on which there were a bunch of maps, in various languages, all pointing to different instances of the Nethescurial island from the beginning. So the good guys broke the effigy and scattered the parts around the world, each of which was placed on an island named the Nethescurial. Which isn't really a good idea if you ask me, because then you can easily find it, but whatever. The dream then reshaped into a dark object in front of him. My impression was that it was conglomerate in form, suggesting a monstrous whole. At the same time, these outlines which alluded to both man and beast, flower and insect, reptiles, stones, and countless things I could not even name, all seemed to be changing, mingling in 1,000 ways that presented any sensible image to the idol. Then the members of the sect came forward and some sacrifice was performed, but it's pretty cryptic as to what actually happened. Then something oozed up on the altar, something thick and oily and strangely colored. Darkly colored, though not with any of the shades of blood. Although the strangeness of this color was more of an idea than a matter of vision, it began to fill the dream and to determine the final stage of its development. Then we get a description of a landscape that sounds just like the island from the manuscript in the beginning, maybe where the Nethescurial bleeds through the most. The ground was as if covered with an ancient darkened mold, and the things rising up from it were the same. Surrounding me was a landscape that might have once been of stone and earth and trees, but had been transformed entirely into something like petrified slime. I gazed upon it spreading before me, twisting in the way of wrought iron tracery of great overgrown gardens of writhing coral. An intricate latticework of hardened mulch whose surface was overrun with a chaos of little carvings, scabby designs that suggested a world of demonic faces and forms. After waking up from this horrible nightmare, he starts to feel a foul presence. He tries praying to gods he knows, but they aren't enough to stop the Nethescurial, who exists in the surface of every being, and within himself too. His condition worsens, he's unable to work or even live normally, with this new discovered dread weighing down on him. Everything seemed to be a manifestation of this evil, and to my eyes, was taking its aspect. I could feel it also emerging in myself, growing stronger behind this living face that I am afraid to confront in the mirror. How could I put anything into my mouth when everything looked the way it did? Hard enough to touch a doorknob or a pair of shoes, even with the protection of the gloves. I could feel every damn thing squirming, not excluding my own flesh. And I could also see what was squirming beneath every surface, my vision penetrating through the usual armor of objects and discerning the same gushing stuff inside whatever I looked upon. He keeps on the move, trying to dodge these intrusive thoughts and the corruption. But he keeps hearing voices from people. Not from their mouths, but from the bottom of their brains. Like everyone's subconsciousness is infiltrated by this deity, and he's the only one able to see it. One night, he stumbles upon a puppet show with an audience watching it, but the puppets freeze mid-play and turn towards him. And the audience does the same, and they start saying something, not through their mouths, but the bottom of their brains. And it is that same ritual chant from the beginning. He burns the manuscript and discovers that the ink used to write it came from that effigy in the beginning, which explains why he was able to be corrupted as strongly as he was. It's like a bad nightmare literally bled through the pages of the book, and those nightmare fears stuck around forever. At the very end of the story, he kind of starts denying everything that's been proven so far. I think he's trying to cope with it or something. It is not a squirming, creeping, smearing shape I see upon the moon. Not the shape of a great deformed crab scuttling out of the black oceans of infinity and invading the island of the moon, crawling with its innumerable bodies upon all the spinning islands of inky space. That shape is not the cancerous totality of all creatures, not the oozing ichor that flows within all creation. Nethescurial is not the secret name of the creation. What I think is interesting about the Nethescurial is that unlike most of Lovecraftian gods, it isn't indifferent to humans, it is actually evil and malevolent. And I like how the story is basically an account of what happens when a regular human syncs up to the knowledge of the Nethescurial and how it's everything, everywhere, all at once. And what makes it scary is that it's kind of relatable. It's like extreme intrusive thoughts of an incomprehensible entity that won't leave you alone. And coming to the realization that it's real is the worst thing ever. It's not like Lovecraft's madness that is incomprehensible and people usually die from it. This one feels more personal, like if fears from nightmares came to real life and you couldn't forget about them, or go back to how you used to live before you knew about them. To me, it reminded me of like when you're a kid and you see something too scary for the age and you just can't stop thinking about it and getting intrusive thoughts about it, because you didn't even think something like that could exist beforehand. In my last Depictions of Gods video, I mentioned Azathoth and Nyarlathotep as far as Lovecraft goes, but there is another entity in this universe, or I should say outside of this universe, and that is Yog-Sothoth. He exists outside of this universe, but knows everything that goes on inside at all times, past, present, and future. This omnipresence is why he's sometimes called the Gate, the Key, and the Guardian. He is another of the most powerful entities in the Lovecraft mythos, first mentioned in the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and more in depth in the Dunwich Horror. Physically, it appears as a moving mass of orbs, eyes, and tendrils. But unlike Nyarlathotep from my last video, he rarely interacts with the humans, unless summoned through a ritual or some way. His most direct involvement can be found in the Dunwich Horror, where he impregnates Lavinia Whatley. And I'm not sure how this actually works, since this is what he looks like, but maybe it's something like that scene from Possession. Anyways, this results in Wilbur Whatley, who is this strange child that matures too quickly and has some unusual body parts, like fur and eyeballs where they shouldn't be. He also appears in the story through the gates of the Silver Key. And now there poured from that limitless mind a flood of knowledge and explanation which opened new vistas to the seeker and prepared him for such a grasp of the cosmos as he had never hoped to possess. He was told how childish and limited is the notion of a tri-dimensional world, and what an infinity of directions there are besides the known directions of up-down, forward-backward, right-left. He was shewn the smallness and tinsel emptiness of the little gods of Earth, with their petty human interests and connections, their hatreds, rages, loves, and vanities, their craving for praise and sacrifice, and their demands for faith contrary to reason and nature. Cults around the mythos worship him to gain infinite knowledge, but as we know, this is a scary thing because humans cannot handle infinite knowledge, so it causes madness. To my understanding, whenever something in the mythos breaks the boundaries of this human understanding, Yog-Sothoth is the one behind it.